If you've ever experienced the quiet that follows when an avoidant person pulls away, you probably know how unsettling it feels. Messages stop, the warmth disappears, and you're left sitting with questions that don't get answered. It can feel like they've shut you out completely. But here's something most people misunderstand. That silence isn't always the end, and it isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's something far more complicated. In many cases, that distance is actually where they're waiting for you. People with avoidant tendencies carry a strange internal conflict. They want emotional closeness, but the moment it gets too real or too intense, their instinct is to step back. So when they withdraw, it doesn't automatically mean they've stopped caring. In fact, quite often, they're still thinking about you more than they let on. The difference is, they don't know how to come back directly. Instead, they wait, quietly, indirectly, sometimes even unconsciously hoping you'll be the one to close the gap. Let's look at the subtle patterns that reveal when this is happening. The first sign is what looks like fake calm after emotional distance or conflict. An avoidant may suddenly appear completely fine. They might act as if nothing affected them at all. You could see them active online, posting normally, focusing on work, or presenting themselves like life is perfectly in order without you in it. But that calm surface can be misleading. Avoidants often use control as a shield. When they feel emotionally overwhelmed, they don't express it, they suppress it. So what looks like peace is often a carefully built layer of self-protection, a way to convince themselves they don't need emotional dependency. Ironically, the more composed and unaffected they seem, the more likely it is that something is going on underneath. If they truly felt nothing, they wouldn't need to maintain that image of being fine. The second sign appears in their quiet, indirect returns. An avoidant who is waiting won't come forward openly with emotional honesty. Saying something like, "I miss you," feels too exposed for them. Instead, they test connection in very subtle ways. They might start viewing your stories again after silence. They may like a post from long ago without explanation. Sometimes they'll send something casual, like a meme or a short "hey," as if it has no emotional weight attached. They could even ask about you through mutual connections instead of contacting you directly. These small actions are not random. They are cautious attempts to reopen access without risking rejection. It's their way of saying, "I still notice you," without putting themselves in a vulnerable position. The third sign is what can be described as emotional echoes. This usually becomes more visible when there has been a real bond between both of you. After distancing themselves, avoidants often begin expressing their feelings indirectly through behavior instead of words. You might notice them returning to places tied to your memories, or listening to music that once meant something to both of you. They may post quotes about missing people, needing space, or emotional confusion without ever mentioning names. Avoidants rarely process emotions through direct conversation. Instead, they leak them through actions and symbolic behavior. That's why it feels like echoes of your connection keep showing up in their life. It's not coincidence. It's unresolved emotion trying to express itself in the only way they allow. The fourth sign is controlled silence. This is not the same as complete emotional disappearance. Controlled silence is intentional distance with limits. They don't fully cut you off, but they don't fully stay either. They may still watch your updates. They might respond slowly, but not block or remove you. There is still some level of awareness between you. This type of silence often means one thing: the door is not fully closed. They're creating space, but also leaving access open, just in case you decide to step in. Deep down, there is usually a quiet expectation behind it. If this matters to you, you'll reach out. It's not always fair, and it often creates emotional confusion, but it comes from their fear of being the one who reaches out first and faces rejection or loss of control. The fifth sign is the feeling of their presence even when they are gone. This is where things become more emotional than visible. Even without contact, you may still feel connected to them in an unspoken way. Their absence doesn't feel empty. It feels active. You might notice yourself thinking about them at random moments, or sensing that they are also thinking about you. In many cases, avoidants carry this same experience internally. They don't express it, but they feel it. You could say it shows up in small behaviors, lingering online presence, indirect engagement, or emotional sensitivity that surfaces without explanation. Even in silence, there is still a thread of connection that hasn't fully broken. It's as if both people are aware of each other, but neither feels safe enough to take the first step. In the end, avoidant behavior is not simple indifference. It's a push and pull between fear and attachment. When they withdraw, it can look like detachment, but underneath that distance, there is often hesitation, emotional conflict, and unspoken waiting. And sometimes, without ever saying it directly, they are hoping you will be the one who makes it feel safe to reconnect. That is the quiet language behind their silence. You'll often notice that even when there's no contact, your mind doesn't fully let go. They show up in random thoughts, in dreams, in moments where nothing around you explains why they suddenly feel present again. It can feel like a quiet, emotional pull that never really disappears. That's because connections with avoidant individuals don't usually end cleanly in the mind. Even when there is silence, something in the emotional system keeps the bond active in the background. It doesn't feel complete, as if something was left unresolved between you. And in many cases, that lingering space is exactly how it was left. Avoidant behavior often revolves around emotional distance as a form of self-protection. They step back to feel in control again, but at the same time, that distance creates a kind of echo. It leaves space where connection used to be. And in that space, there's often an unspoken expectation that you might reach out first, restoring what feels unfinished. When closure isn't given clearly, the silence itself becomes the message. And silence is often where emotional tension grows the most. Another pattern that stands out is how they observe without actively engaging. When an avoidant is truly detached, they usually remove themselves completely from your emotional world. But when they are still internally connected, their behavior looks different. They may not interact with your posts, but they notice them. They see changes in your mood through what you share. They become aware of when you seem active, happy, distant, or quiet. Nothing is shown on the surface, but attention is still there in the background. If your silence stretches, that dynamic often becomes heavier for them. It creates a quiet internal pressure, almost like a standoff, where neither side wants to be the first to fully step forward. And beneath that restraint, there is often a hidden hope that you will initiate contact, because it removes their fear of rejection. Then there is something more confusing. Moments of sudden emotional openness followed by withdrawal. An avoidant might unexpectedly share something personal or meaningful. It could be a memory, a feeling, or something vulnerable they normally wouldn't express. In that moment, it may feel like they are finally letting you in, but soon after, they retreat again. This push and pull usually reflects an internal conflict rather than manipulation. That brief openness is often a test, subconscious or emotional, to see how connection feels again. When it feels safe in the moment, they move closer. When vulnerability starts to feel overwhelming again, they step back to regain emotional control. It's not a straight line, it's fluctuation between desire and fear. Another subtle indicator appears in their routines. Avoidant individuals are typically consistent in how they structure their lives, so when their patterns shift, it can signal emotional disturbance. They might avoid certain places tied to memories or unexpectedly reappear in spaces connected to you. Sometimes they withdraw from familiar routines. Other times they drift closer to shared environments again. These changes are rarely random. They often reflect internal attempts to manage emotional discomfort while still keeping connection alive in some indirect form. And even in those adjustments, there is usually an underlying awareness of you, almost like they hope their presence will somehow be noticed without having to directly acknowledge it. Then there is indirect communication, which often goes unnoticed unless you are paying close attention. Avoidants rarely express emotions directly. Instead, they communicate through vague posts, indirect statements, or seemingly casual messages that still carry emotional undertones. A line about appreciation, loss, or distance may not mention you, but still feel connected to your shared history. These are not accidental expressions. They are safer forms of communication, ways of reaching out without fully exposing themselves to emotional risk. It's not about playing games. It's about trying to express feeling without stepping into vulnerability. Another clear pattern is mirroring. When you become distant, they often mirror that distance. When you become expressive or confident, they may reflect that tone back in subtle ways. This isn't always conscious. It's an emotional synchronization mechanism where they adjust their behavior based on your energy to maintain connection without direct involvement. In some cases, this mirroring becomes the closest thing to an admission that they are still emotionally attuned to you, even if they cannot openly say it. So what does all of this actually mean? If an avoidant seems to be waiting, it is rarely because they feel nothing. More often, it's because they feel something but don't trust emotional closeness enough to act on it directly. Fear and attachment exist at the same time, pulling them in opposite directions. But the important question is not only about them, it's about you. If you choose to reach out, the real difference lies in the emotional place you are coming from. If the intention is anxiety, pressure, or the need to fix uncertainty, it usually intensifies their withdrawal. But if the approach is grounded, calm, and self-contained, it creates a very different dynamic. Something simple, steady, and free of expectation carries a different emotional weight. It doesn't demand, it doesn't chase, it simply opens a door without forcing it. And in avoidant dynamics, that sense of emotional safety, not intensity, is often what determines whether connection can be revisited at all. In the end, avoidant behavior is rarely about a lack of feeling. It's about the struggle between wanting closeness and fearing the emotional weight that comes with it. Their silence, their distance, their indirect signals, and even their sudden moments of warmth all come from that inner conflict. What often looks like disinterest is usually hesitation. What feels like absence is often emotional containment. And what seems like confusion in you is frequently the reflection of their own unresolved feelings. But the most important truth is this: you cannot build clarity out of guessing patterns alone. Whether an avoidant reaches out or stays distant, your peace cannot depend on decoding their silence. If there is real connection, it will not survive through confusion. It will eventually move toward clarity, effort, and consistency. And if it doesn't, then the silence itself has already answered more than words ever could.